Okay, so I had every intention of making my next video one that was someone from overseas saying positive things about Australia. Because that's what we like, right? We like people who appreciate our country and who don't compare it to their own country and who don't come across as being a bit of a tosser. But this popped up in my feed and I saw a little bit of it. I haven't watched all of it, but I did watch a little bit of it at the beginning, and I just thought, I have to react to this guy. I'll pre-warn you, just a little bit that I saw made my blood boil. And maybe I'm just overreacting, but let's have a look at this together and let me know your thoughts about this guy. Because to me, he seems like a bit of a wanker.
Australia and America, two countries located at the opposite ends of the globe, and as a result, two countries that cannot be more different from each other. Right? Wrong. Surprisingly, despite the fact that mainland America is about 7,000 miles away from Australia, there are quite a few similarities between living in America and Australia. I've had the pleasure of living in both countries. I currently live in America. I've been living in America for years, but I did have the chance to briefly live in Australia as well.
Okay, so when someone mentions that they briefly lived in Australia, you should probably know what's coming. I should have taken that as a sign to stop watching this video, and then maybe I wouldn't be doing a reaction to it right this moment. I'm just going to make a comment for those people who watched my previous video. Check out the size of that light switch.
So I know what I'm talking about when I compare living in America and Australia.
Briefly living in Australia does not make you an expert. Straight up, this guy comes across as being somewhat arrogant. Don't question me, I know what I'm talking about because I briefly lived there.
So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 interesting things that you should take into account when living in America versus Australia. And I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to dive into it right now. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is the food. All right, I'm just going to come out and say this. I actually think America has better food than Australia.
So who saw that one coming? I certainly didn't. I would not have expected to hear that. I think most of the time, I can't think of any videos aside from one, which was an American couple who just, their entire video was nothing but complaining. Everyone else talks about Australian food as being pretty damn good. The difference, of course, is that we don't have all those nasty additives that are basically illegal here in Australia, so aren't included in our food. So perhaps it does come down to tastes. But let's see what his reasoning is.
Don't get me wrong, I think Australia has some great aspects of its cuisine. It has an awesome coffee culture. Australians know how to do coffee. And there are certain foods in Australia that are really good. But overall, I actually believe that America has better food. Australian cuisine is heavily influenced by British cuisine. That's why things like fish and chips and meat pies are so popular in Australia.
Okay, someone's got to say this. Bullshit. Our food is heavily influenced by a multitude of different countries. Even here in little old Bendigo, you can get such a huge range of food. The number of takeouts in Bendigo here from so many different nationalities is just staggering. If you go down to Melbourne, then it's mind-blowing.
Honestly, I think fish and chips and meat pies are everywhere in Australia. And Australian cuisine is also influenced by the millions of immigrants that have come to Australia over the last few decades. So you'll find a lot of Italian cuisine, Greek food, Vietnamese, Chinese food, Indian food. There are a lot of different cuisines that are very present in Australia. And that means that Australian food is very diverse, it's varied, and it's very good. On top of that, Australia has an awesome coffee culture. Australians know how to do coffee. Seriously, you guys have high standards for your coffee, and I really appreciated that when I lived there. And yeah, there are some local Australian foods that are also really good. Kangaroo meat is a thing in Australia. Australia is also known for Tim Tams, which is an absolutely delicious chocolate covered cookie. And of course, Vegemite is a typical Australian spread, which I didn't like at first, but once you put it on toast with butter, it's actually pretty decent. But honestly, I do feel like you get better food in America. That's just because I feel like there's a lot more diversity in the cuisine here in America.
This guy is unreal. He just stood there and he listed a whole bunch of different multicultural influences on Australian cuisine. And he hasn't really scratched the surface when you think about the variety of food that we have here in Australia. And now he's turning around and saying that American food is more diverse. From what I've heard, mostly in America you have Mexican food and American food. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there isn't quite the range. I've heard that Thai food, not so much in America. Chinese food, yeah, but not like we have here, because we have a strong Chinese culture here, which dates right back to the goldfield era.
For example, the southwest of the United States has a cuisine that is distinct from that of New England, and New England cuisine is quite a bit different from Southern cuisine. So America is known for its variety and diversity of food options. On top of that, just like in Australia, immigrants to America have also brought their own cuisines, and therefore America has a great selection of Italian, Mexican, Middle Eastern, Indian, Chinese cuisine as well. Overall, I feel like American cuisine is better. I feel like the food in America is very, very tasty. With that being said, I will say that Australia does deliver high quality stuff, especially when it comes to its coffee. Its coffee is friggin' good.
This guy is utterly, utterly unreal. I'm sorry, but saying that, well, we have three different regions in America in terms of American food, and we have an influence from these, what did he name, like 4 or 5 countries. That means that we have this huge range of food here in America. Like, I don't think he has actually experienced food in Australia that much, by the sounds of it, because here the choices are endless. And of course, depending on which city you go to, is going to depend on what types of foods are actually available. My understanding from watching so many other videos is that we actually have a far greater variety when it comes to multiculturalism in like cuisine than many other countries. Sure, you get meat pies and fish and chips pretty much anywhere, but that's a small part of Australian cuisine. And as for talking about American food tasting better, let's talk about all the additives that go into American foods that are actually banned here in Australia. Australian food is so much more healthy and so much more natural, and I can understand why someone like him would suggest that American food is so much tastier. It's that whole McDonald's taste bud kind of thing, isn't it? If you eat enough of that crappy fast food that's full of preservatives, then that's what you get a taste for, because you forget what healthy food really tastes like. And like I said, American foods are so full of unhealthy preservatives, things that are banned here in Australia. So if I have to choose between American tasty or Australian healthy, I know which way I'd go.
All right, the second thing I'm going to talk about is the climate and weather of each country. I think America, depending on how you measure it, is the fourth largest country in the world. And Australia is, I believe, right behind it at number 5 or number 6. So both countries are huge.
Okay, the size difference is actually almost negligible. The difference in size between Australia and the USA is really not that great at all. So it's hardly worth making a comparison there. To him, apparently, it's more important for America to be the fifth largest country, and Australia is only the sixth largest. But like I said, they're pretty much the same size.
But here's what I'll say. Australia, for the most part, is a very warm and hot country. Most of the interior of the country is a hot desert. Meanwhile, certain parts of the country, namely in the south of Australia, see a more Mediterranean climate. I think this is the case around Perth and around Adelaide. And then the east coast of Australia, particularly the northeast of Australia, sees a more tropical or subtropical climate. And that's also true for areas around Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and I think even areas around Sydney as well. Melbourne, Australia and Tasmania see more temperate climate. But with that being said, in general, Australia is a very warm and hot country. Most areas don't see much snowfall, if any snowfall at all. Snow and freezing temperatures is not something that a lot of Australians experience, if ever.
This guy is a complete, utter moron. Okay, leave a comment below if you live in an area that sees cold temperatures. Like, I'm sorry, but even areas around Queensland get into minus temperatures through winter. We have plenty of areas in Australia that see snow. I think he doesn't understand what a temperate climate means. Because if he actually looked up a temperate climate, he would understand that, hey, Tasmania gets snow. There are places in Tasmania that are guaranteed pretty much to get snow every year. There are places in Victoria and in New South Wales that are pretty much guaranteed to get snow every year. We have a ski industry here in Australia. And you go inland and you can get some pretty bloody cold winters. And we do see freezing temperatures. Sure, in summer it can get pretty damn hot around many places. And sure, central Australia, like here in central Victoria, our climate in Bendigo is considered to be Mediterranean. But you have this huge range of types of climate here in Australia. It's not all dry and hot. So he's got no understanding at all of Australian climate. And I don't think he even understands what he's talking about in terms of what is meant by a Mediterranean climate or a temperate climate or a tropical or subtropical climate. He's obviously looked these up, but doesn't have any understanding of what they mean.
On the other hand, again, America is just so big. You see pretty much every single type of climate and weather in America. You got deserts, you got the Arctic, you got the tropics, you got a temperate climate up in the Northeast and around the Great Lakes. You got a subtropical climate in the south of the United States. You got the Great Plains, you got alpine climate up in the mountains. You got a Mediterranean climate in California. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, you got pretty much every single type of climate and weather in the United States, it's very diverse in its climate, and I think that's what makes America one of the most appealing places to live in. You can basically pick the type of climate that's right for you and live in a region that appeals to you based on its climate.
Okay, here's a tip. If you're trying to put forward an argument, make sure that you're not basically shooting yourself in the foot and saying exactly what you've already said. Okay, he's trying to say here that America is so huge, that it's got so many different climates, that means that you can basically choose where you live, because then you can choose the type of climate you live in. Well, isn't this exactly what he's just said about Australia? Australia, as I mentioned, is pretty much the same size as America. And maybe we don't have all the names, but climate-wise, you could pretty much match climates from places in Australia to places in America. There isn't a huge difference. You want hot weather, you want tropical weather, go live in Queensland. You want temperate weather, go live in Melbourne or go live in Tassie. It's no different from what he's saying about America. This guy is doing my head in, I swear.
All right, the next thing I'll talk about are the things to do in each country. And both countries offer a lot for those living there or for those visiting. Australia has so many outdoor activities that you can participate in. You can go hiking out in the outback. You can visit the wine country in South Australia. You can go snorkeling or scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef. You can go sailing off the coast of Queensland. You can visit some pretty awesome cities like Sydney and Melbourne. There are plenty of sporting events happening in Australia too, like the Australian Open and the Formula One Australia Grand Prix in Melbourne as well. It's a great country, particularly if you want to do some outdoor activities. Australia is fantastic for that. With that being said, I gotta say, America offers more things to do. Not only does America have some of the world's most renowned cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami, but it also has some of the world's most preeminent vacation destinations like Las Vegas and Orlando, Florida, known for its theme parks. America also has the great outdoors as well. You can go surfing off the coast of California or Hawaii. You can go hiking up in the Appalachian Mountains or the Rocky Mountains. You can go skiing or snowboarding pretty much anytime during the winter. You can have a great time in some of the party cities of America like Nashville and New Orleans. There are just a lot of things to do in America. You're never gonna be bored living in America. I don't think you'll ever get bored living in Australia too, but there are just more options and more things to do in the United States.
So, from that list of things he just said that you can do in America, which makes America so much better than Australia, can anyone point out for me one thing that you can't actually do here in Australia also? This guy seems determined that no matter what he says, that he's going to argue that America is better. But as yet, he's not come up with anything concrete in any of these points that to me says America is better. He's saying he thinks you can do more in America, but the list of things he gave are all things you can do in Australia. Sure, if you want to go skiing, you've got to go to the alpine regions, but isn't that the same in America? If you live on the California coast and you want to go skiing in winter, you still got to head to Northern California to do it, right? This guy is just, I'm speechless. I can't believe someone could be this much of a complete utter twat. I would like to know how long he lives in Australia for, because it seems to me that all he's doing here is just trying to throw negativity at Australia. Where is his solid argument? Because so far, there's nothing.
All right, I kind of touched upon this earlier, but the fourth thing I'm going to talk about is the wild, is the great outdoors. And the things that you can do outside in both countries. And both countries have their fair share of things to do in the great outdoors. Like I said earlier, in America, you can go snowboarding or skiing in the Rocky Mountains, in the Appalachian Mountains as well. There are plenty of national parks and trails in which you can go hiking in. You got desert attractions like the Grand Canyon to check out as well. If you want to check out some coral reefs in the tropics, well, you can do that in Florida or in Hawaii. And if you just want to chill by a lake, well, America's got plenty of lakes and rivers for that too. America does have the Great Lakes, and there are plenty of water activities to do on those Great Lakes so long as they're not frozen. Australia has much of the same thing. You know, you do have some ski resorts, although I think that the ski resorts in Australia pale in comparison to the ski hills in North America.
I don't ski and I don't live in a skiing region, but I've heard that we do have some pretty decent ski slopes here in Australia.
Specifically in the Rocky Mountains of the United States. The Great Barrier Reef is a great spot for scuba diving and snorkeling, or even some sailing. You could take a road trip down the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. You could hike some mountains as well, so there are plenty of outdoor things to do in Australia too.
So everything that he listed in terms of things you can do outdoors in America are things you can do outdoors in Australia. So there's that. But let's look at it this way too. We have the lifestyle which allows us to be able to go and do all this outdoor stuff all year round. Whereas, from what I hear, Americans spend so much of their life working to live so that they don't get to go and appreciate the outdoors. Maybe once a year for a week they get a chance to go on a hike. Whereas, you know, I think about people that I know down in Tassie, and it's just commonplace to just, you know, oh, went on a hike over the weekend. Or people who choose to live in a coastal area so they can go surfing several times a week. So I guess that's where the difference comes in. I can't comment on whether or not our great outdoors is any better than America's great outdoors, but I can say that we have the lifestyle to appreciate it.
The next thing I'm going to talk about are its people, and both Americans and Australians are similar in certain ways and pretty different in other ways. I think the similarities include the fact that both Australia and America have people that come from different walks of life. You have people that are born and raised in America and Australia, and you also have a lot of immigrants that come from different parts of the world. You have people from small towns, people from big cities, and in general, I have to say that both Americans and Australians are actually pretty outgoing people. Whenever I travel around the world, the people that are most noticeable when I'm in different countries, like let's say for example, if I'm traveling throughout Europe, the people that are most noticeable are Australians and Americans.
Okay, apologies to my American friends, but let's call a spade a spade. There's outgoing and friendly, and then there is loud and in your face. And there's a lot of American tourists who are loud and in your face. There are also some really lovely outgoing friendly American tourists. But I think turning around and lumping Australians and Americans all together and saying, oh, they're just all outgoing, is not quite accurate.
I don't know why they just stand out the most. But one thing I have to say that sets them apart is that Americans actually tend to be a little bit friendlier. But one thing I have to say that sets them apart is that Americans actually tend to be a little bit friendlier.
Yes, you actually heard him say that. He said, Americans actually tend to be a little bit more friendlier. This guy, I'm just constantly speechless over the dumbass things that he says. I have never, ever, ever heard anyone claim that Americans are more friendly than Australians. We are recognised worldwide as being friendly. If this guy believes that Americans are more friendly, chances are that when he was in Australia, living here, very briefly, that he just pissed off so many Australians that they just couldn't tolerate him enough to try and actually be friendly. Because I'm just mind blown that anyone would say that. This guy is the original tosser. Or as another creator who I follow would say, he's a complete utter twonk. Now I'm going to split this video and make it a two-parter because for starters I need to just bring my blood pressure down before tackling the rest of this video, because I've never come across someone who just makes me so irate in terms of videos done by people talking about Australia. And this guy, I'm lost for words. I can't believe anyone could be this much of a twat. He's making Americans look bad. And I'm sure that if I were to show this to any of my American friends, they would have the same reaction. This guy is... I can't even describe what this guy is, because is he even real? Or is he just doing this for clicks? I don't know. But like I said, I'm going to split this video in half, so this will be part 1, and I'll put out a part 2 tomorrow. Because I think we all need a chance to get our blood pressure back down again, and to breathe and relax before tackling the rest of this video. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and go ahead, leave your comments below. I am looking forward to hearing what people have to say.